Hey y'all, and welcome back to Swift and Ear. Last time we did power rankings was back in the preseason, and like I said, every 3 weeks I'm gonna do new power rankings. So there will probably be like 6 by the end of the year, and then I'll do a power rankings for every single week of the playoffs. So there's preseason, and then 6 throughout the season, or I guess 5, because then the 6th one will be in the playoffs, and then an extra 2, I guess. I mean, once I get to the Super Bowl, I'll probably just do a prediction on who I think will win, and maybe if I think it'll be an upset, I don't know. We'll see. It just depends. But if you guys have been watching me for a bit, then you'll know that most of my power rankings are made around like playoffs. I don't really rank them on how good they are now exactly, if that makes sense. So like if someone is injured but they're gonna come back in like 2 weeks from now, I usually will say that, well, they'll be back soon and they'll be pretty good then. I mean, if you want me to go over it in a different way, you can ask for that, but we'll just get into it. Alright, so we have the first portion of this, right? So we have 5 different things. We have the deep playoff contenders, the playoff contenders, the outside looking in, and the mid, and then might be time to start thinking about tanking, because although it's only week 3, there's already some teams that are already there at the bottom of the barrel. But I'll get into predictions later. I'll just try and upload that before the game tonight, but I'll upload it then. But this will be first, obviously, as you'll know by now. But we'll start off with number 32. It is the Houston Texans. And yeah, I know they don't have the worst record in the league, and I know I said last time that they might actually be decent, but that was kind of half-hearted, and based on what I saw against the Bears, I have pretty much no faith in them anymore. Very bad team. Last time I had them at number 27, so it's not like I really was expecting them to do very good, but right now this is probably the worst team in the league. And now the next one at number 31 is the Seattle Seahawks, who are also one of the worst teams in the league. Last time I had them at number 32. So, honestly, them versus Houston, we'll see how that goes. As for right now, though, Houston has the lead towards tanking over the Seahawks because they're 0-2-1, meanwhile the Seahawks are 1-2. So, just very, very terrible teams. Just very bad. The Seahawks, I mean, they looked good against the Broncos, but every team has looked good against the Broncos. Or, well, not good, more like good enough to the point where they could beat them, but not quite. I'll get to Denver later, because Houston gave them a run for their money. Seattle beat them. San Francisco, I don't know what happened there. It was just a very dull game, but whatever. Yeah, I have the Seahawks being slightly better than I had them earlier, but that's just because Houston is that bad. Next, you have the Washington Commanders at number 30. So initially, watching them week 1 against the Jaguars, it's like, okay, it's the Jaguars, and I don't know, maybe they'll turn stuff up. But since then, they got blown out by the Lions and the Eagles, pretty bad. It was ugly games, ugly football. Whenever these teams would be playing. This team's been playing, I'd mostly look somewhere else because it's just so incredibly boring to watch. They're not a good football team at all. They're led by Carson Wentz, who is not that good. I don't know. I just don't. This is not a good team. Let's just be real about it. So yeah, last time they were at number 25, so I guess I overranked them a bit, but we'll see. That's only week 3. But you might want to start thinking about tanking, Washington fans. Next, you have the Atlanta Falcons, are also a very terrible team. This team is... They could be 3-0 right now. They actually could be. I mean, they choked badly against the Saints, where it was another situation where they should have won that game. They almost came back against the Rams, 28-3, and 31-27. They had a chance to get a touchdown, take the lead when they were down 31-25 with a 3 interception in the end zone. They beat the Seahawks. Nothing big there, but yeah, the Falcons are falconing. This isn't really anything new. I just don't have much faith in this team. They were previously at 31, so it's better now. They're at 29. Not much better though. This team kind of sucks. So they're at 29. Now at 28, you have the Chicago Bears. The Bears are also a bad team. They beat San Francisco in a torrential downpour, which is looking more and more to be against San Francisco more than anything else, just based on how badly they've played since that game. I mean, they beat the Seahawks, but then I don't know what happened in Denver. Ugly game. Pretty much every game the 49ers have played have been ugly. But anyways, the Bears are actually 2-1 right now. They lost to the Packers in week 2, but they beat the 49ers, as I said, and they beat the Houston Texans last week. So not really that interesting a resume, as you can imagine. But I don't know. Yeah, this team isn't very good, but I don't know. It's hard to tell with this team. I have them at number 28, which is better than last time. They were at 30. So probably not a good thing though if you want to tank. If you gave Houston the W, that would have been helpful. I don't think you guys have much of a chance. I'm going to be real. Next, you have the New York Jets. The Jets are a kind of a hard case. When Wilson comes back, we'll see if they can actually do stuff. But for right now, they don't look very good. They, I don't remember what. Oh yeah, they got beat by the Ravens in week 1. Week 2, they edged out a comeback against the Browns. Good for you, I guess. From there, the Jets. I don't know. They lost badly to the Bengals, who were 2-2 going into that week. But they have Zach Wilson coming back, so we'll see if they can turn their ship around with him. But for right now, I don't really have much faith in them. I'm sorry. Okay, so now we go into the midsection, to the point where I think they might be able to do something. I'm not going to say it's time to start thinking about tanking, although it might be for some of them. But for the first ones, I have the Las Vegas Raiders, who are at number 26. And, man, I don't know what is up with these guys. They're doing everything they can to lose. I mean, Tennessee gave them a good chance to try and win earlier on Sunday. The Cardinals, they fumbled it twice. Twice they gave it to them. They just wanted to lose that game. I don't know why, but they did. So they're the only 0-3 team. And then the first week they lost to the Chargers, which isn't looking that impressive as the weeks go on, but we'll see. It was a close game against the Chargers, but I don't know. I don't think this team is that good. I'm gonna be real here. I don't have much faith in this Chargers or in this Raiders team, but they can still turn their ship around because, I mean, they might just they always start off rough usually, except for last year for some reason. But that's an anomaly. So we'll see if they'll be able to turn it around or not. But I don't know. We'll see. Next we have, and they were 26 this time, and previously they were number 10. So this will be the first of a few very large jumps on my sheet here. So they lost. So they're minus 16 from where I had previously. That's just terrible. Anyways, you have at number 25 the Pittsburgh Steelers, who they're similar to the Commanders. I can't watch their games and find any interest in them. They're just so boring. The only one I'll find interesting is when they play the Saints and the Bucs, and that's pretty much it. Because I'll have rooting interest in that one. Ugly, ugly match. Ugly. So ugly. Previously they're at 23. Now they're at 25. This is just, it's such a bore watching this team, I swear to God. And speaking of bores to watch, you have at number 24, the New England Patriots. And the Steelers were previously 23, so they're -2. And the Patriots were 21, so they're -3. Both of these teams are terrible. Mac Jones is out, so he might actually end up being worse. But as I said, I don't really count injuries as long as they're not season-ending. But I think as it time drags on, they'll be like a 6-11 team or a 7-10 team. So not completely terrible, but still bad. Very mid. Alright, moving on, you have at number 23, you have the Tennessee Titans. The Titans, also incredibly boring to watch. Like, this team, I don't know what to think about this team, really. It's so tough to gauge this team, you know? I mean, they're just so weird. It's hard to describe the Titans, because it feels like they should win these games, but they're just letting them like go out of their fingers like sand. Like that Giants game, they let that just fall out of their hands. Not the Buffalo game. The Buffalo game, they got owned. Last game, they actually held on to a win against Las Vegas. But that's not saying much because they tried to give it away. This team, they can beat mid teams, but they can't beat good teams. Like, they get crushed against good teams. But when they beat mid and like these kinds of teams, I mean, they're like they're a bit up on the food chain above the bottom feeders. They're like the feeders of the bottom feeders. Previously, the Titans were number 18, so they lost 5 because they're 23. Next, you have the Arizona Cardinals. Also a very mid team. I don't expect much from them. They got beat by the Rams. Yes, they got beat by the Rams. And another incredibly boring matchup. As for all these teams I have down here, like football last year and week 1 of this year, for some reason, it was so fun to watch. Like, it was so fun to watch all these teams play. But most of the teams on this list, they play some of the worst football I've ever watched. And I'll talk about the Broncos with that too, but they're a bit higher up. The Cardinals, last time were number 22, this time we're number 22, so no change. There's actually, I think there's one more like that we'll get to that didn't change. I don't know if that's bad or not. But the Cardinals are 1-2 after getting blown out by the Chiefs, barely edging out the Raiders because it was a game no one wanted to win except for the guy who picked up the fumble and did the scoop and score. But yeah, and the other loss I had was against the Rams, as I said previously, in a very bad matchup. I feel like once DeAndre Hopkins comes back in Week 6, they'll be pretty good. But by that time, they'll probably be 1-5 or 2-4 or something. So we'll see what happens. But I think that they either started off their late season collapse early, or they just are gonna be terrible this year. But only time will tell. So I got them bookmarked to see if they'll be good eventually, but I don't know. I don't have much faith in this team either. At 21, you have the Carolina Panthers, who were previously 26 for a gain of 5. I don't know what to think about this Panthers team, because on one hand, they look like they could be pretty decent, but on the other hand, I don't know. They beat the Saints last week for their first win. Previous 2 weeks, I think were close losses in both cases, right? They played the Browns and barely lost that. And who else did they play? Hold on. I'm sorry, I can't keep all of these in my head. Oh, they played the Giants and they lost. That's right. They played the Giants. I think that was a close loss too. So really, this team isn't that bad, honestly. They're not as bad as I expected them to be. I think I had them going 3-14, 4-13, which they're on track for that, technically speaking. But most of their losses were to teams that I would consider better than them, at least a little bit better. And some of them were close, like actually pretty decently close. And then they just washed out the Saints. So I don't know what's happening there, but I'm loving every second of it. Yeah, I didn't give them a snowball's chance in hell against New Orleans, but they beat them pretty bad. Worse than the scoreboard shows, anyways. So this Panthers team could do something. I don't think they'll challenge the division. I don't even think they'll sneak into number 7, but I think they might end off the season like 8-9 potentially. So really, like, balls in your court, Panthers. So do whatever you need to do to get it where you need to. But I don't know. We'll see. They might still be the same Panthers they've been for like half a decade now. So, all right. So moving on, you got, speaking of the Giants, you have the New York Giants. I don't know how to gauge this team either, because this team at times looks awful, like absolutely terrible, but at other times they look like the Lions did last year, which is to say terrible, like the Lions do this year. So they have spirit, they have heart, which is something this Giants team has lacked for pretty much as long as I can remember. Like, yeah, no, I can't really think of a time I've seen a really excited Giants team. This team could do stuff. It really could. It just has to have the fire in their hearts. They gotta work hard to get what they want. I don't know. We'll see. But I think this Giants team can really do stuff. But I don't have too much faith in them because they're the Giants, which I should apply that to other teams I think of. But I have too many hot takes. I can't start saying the Giants will make the playoffs or anything, which I don't think they will, but maybe. They have a chance. It's not impossible. And I'd say this is tough. The next team, I don't know, they're kind of in between mid and outside looking in to the point where I just don't know. But screw it. I'll put them in mid. You've got the Indianapolis Colts. And this Colts team, I don't know. How do you tie the Texans, get shut out by the Jaguars, which, I mean, it's a curse, but even still, at least score points. But then the next week they beat the Chiefs. How does that happen? It makes zero sense. I mean, any given Sunday, but, like, come on. I don't get it. This Colts team is blowing my mind. I'll talk more about them in predictions when I talk about their game, which is against the Titans. But, oh my lord, I just don't know what to think about this Colts team. So I'm going to put them, you know what, I'll put them in outside looking in. I'll be kind about it, because I feel like tying the Texans, losing to the Jaguars, as bad as both of those are, but then beating the Chiefs kind of equilibrates. I mean, if it was like they lost to the Colts, or lost to the Texans and the Jags, but then beat the Browns or something, I wouldn't have them there. But the Chiefs really make stuff up. Although I'll talk about the Jags later, and I'll give my thoughts on that. But I don't know. This team's weird. It's very strange. Last time I had them at 15, so they're at 19 right now, so not that much of a difference. But man, I don't know what to think about this team at all. I don't. But whatever. Let's talk next about number 18, which is the San Francisco 49ers. The 49ers lost to the Bears in a monsoon, which I'm willing to forgive. Was willing to forgive. I'm going to hold it a bit against them. Then they beat the Seahawks bad, and then they lost to the Broncos in one of the most boring games I've ever watched. Like, I like defensive games, but I don't like defensive games where it's like the offense is so terrible that it looks like a defensive struggle. But really what it is that the offense is so bad they can't get the ball moving, so it just becomes a low-scoring game. Because there's a difference between a low-scoring game and a defensive struggle. I mean, those are two... I mean, if it's a defensive struggle, it will be a low-scoring game. But just because it's a low-scoring game doesn't mean it's a defensive struggle, if that makes sense. Like, I wouldn't call... I mean, somewhat. I like the Bucs versus Saints game last year, where we got shut out 9-0. It was a defensive struggle in the sense that the Saints' defense was really good against the Bucs, although there were injuries. But on the Saints side of the ball, their offense was so terrible that they could only score 9 points because the Bucs' defense wasn't anything special that night. I mean, they had Taysom Hill as their quarterback. But I'm going off on a tangent. This Niners team is hard to gauge, and they have Jimmy Garoppolo, so they'll make the playoffs probably, but I don't know. We'll see. With Elijah Mitchell out, you can tell it's hurting them bad because the running game is stalling so bad. Except for the occasional Deebo Samuel rush attempt. But we'll see. So I have them at 18. Previously they were at number 4, so this is a big drop off. This is like a minus 14 here. Yeah. Okay. Next, on the outside looking in, you have the Minnesota Vikings, who are at number 17. Yes, number 17. Previously at number 20. This team is kind of hard to gauge too. I mean, they beat the Packers bad, then they got beat by the Eagles bad because primetime Kirk, and then they edged out the Lions, who I still have as being better than them, by the way, as you can tell. But I don't know. It's a weird team. It's hard to tell. They could do well, but at the same time, I don't know how well tested they are, and that's why I don't do power rankings every single week, because I look like a fool instead of doing it one at a time and only looking like a fool every 3 weeks, minus my predictions last week, which are atrocious. This Vikings team, they could make the playoffs. They could also miss it badly, so I have them on the outside looking in. A lot of these, like the outside looking in is really just the midpoint between mid and playoff contenders. It really is. Alright, moving on to the next one. You have the Denver Broncos, who I expected to be really good, but they are very terrible. Not very terrible, but just so insanely boring to watch. I cannot stand this team. Every game they've played this year, I probably could have... I bet a 5-year-old could have planned out a better game plan than Nathaniel Hackett can. It's so bad. It's such a boring game to watch. And so I'm happy I don't have to watch the Bucs play them this year. I only have to deal with them playing the Steelers and the Browns. So that will be something. That will be something to watch. But yeah, not a good team, really. I don't know. It's so hard to gauge this team, whether they're good or not, because their offense is terrible. You'd think with Russell Wilson they'd be decent, but they just aren't. I don't know what it is. I previously had them at number 8. They're at number 16. So a decent drop off there. Now at number 15, you have the New Orleans Saints. And the thing about the Saints is I only have them there because all these other teams are worse than them. Like, they aren't something special themselves. I still have them being better than Carolina even though they lost to them. But this team is looking like 2019 Buccaneers because good defense, good weapons with Olave and Thomas and Landry. You have kind of a mid-running game because Kamara doesn't look the same, and Ingram is about as good as 2019 Rojo, is what I'd say. So this team is this is a redux of 2019 Bucs. I'm calling it. They're gonna end the season 7-10, or either 8-9 or 7-10, and miss the playoffs. I don't think this team is gonna go anywhere. They're gonna win games they shouldn't and lose games they shouldn't, and it's gonna be a whole damn mess. And we'll see what happens with the Saints. But I'll be praying they lose all the way. They were previously number 17, so they're a bit better on here. But that, like I said, that's just because a lot of other teams dropped off. Next, at number 14, you have the Cleveland Browns. And I don't know what to think about the Browns either. They look like they want to win, I'll say that. Jacoby Brissett is interesting to watch, not because he's a good quarterback, but because he has heart, and I like that about him. Kind of like Jared Goff with the Lions. Except, honestly, the Lions are better than the Browns, but we'll get to that. So, the Browns, they have a good defense, they have good running game, they have Amari Cooper, and their quarterback situation is kind of bad. They're kind of like the Colts, but better, honestly. They're like the Colts, except they're less inept somehow. I don't know how the Browns are not inept, but they aren't. Once Deshaun Watson comes back, we'll see if they're good or not. He might start off badly because he hasn't played football in 2 years, but we'll see. But for right now, this is where the Browns are. They were previously at number 13, so they only lost one spot. So yeah, that's where I have them. And this is a tough one to choose here. If I put them in playoff contenders or not. So, yeah, I think I'll start off with playoff contenders. So the first of which are the LA Chargers. The Chargers are a weird case, and it entirely depends on what the next couple weeks look like. Because if they look like they're gonna be bad the next couple weeks, then they're going down straight to the 8th circle of hell. Because last week was an abomination, and I'm willing to forgive that because last year they lost to the Texans badly, which in the end did hurt them, but at the same time they probably would have done decent in the playoffs if they made it. Probably better than the Raiders did. But, and this is a but, I'm willing to forgive this of them, but they have to do something about it. They have to do something about this, because if Herbert is going to look like that every single week of the rest of the season, or even the next month, this Chargers team is not going to work, and they're just going to get the boot immediately on this roster, which I know isn't saying much, but for real, these guys are going to be quick frauds if Herbert sucks. Especially since Keenan Allen is out. That's killing them. And their defense that was looking so stellar is starting to break down too. So they're starting to look like the Bucs in the preseason, except in the regular season, which I'm happy that we had. I'm happy that most of our injuries were in the preseason at this point, because this chemistry is terrible. All right, moving on to the next playoff contender. Oh, and this LSU was at 13, and they were previously at 9, so they lost 4. But the next team at number 12 is the Detroit Lions, who, yes, I still have them better than the Vikings, even though I lost to them. I know, what you're going to say about that, but I still have faith in this Lions team, for one. And for two, they should have won that game handily. Okay, that was terrible play calling, but in any other situation, besides maybe the Falcons and the Broncos, the Lions should have won that game. So I feel like if they fix that up, they should be pretty good. Because that's like the thing that held them back in that game. They should be 2-1 right now. But yeah, this Lions team, I think they'll be pretty good. I did have them boosted up from where they were at 16 previously. Now they're at 12. Just because like I said, all the other teams are starting to look worse than I predicted they would be. Like, I expected these teams to look interesting, but most of them are so boring to watch. Like, it's embarrassing how bad these games look. They're not good football. Anyways, next, at number 11, I have the Cincinnati Bengals. The Bengals coming back against the Jets. I'm hoping this is a sign for things to come, because if they look like they're 1-2, weeks 1 and 2 selves, then I don't see this working out at all. But I do have them worse than the Ravens, obviously. But I don't know. This team is good, but my goodness, it's so tough to watch this team right now. They were previously number 3, and so they fell off a bit. And now they're at 11, so they lost 8 on that. Pretty rough, but I do have faith in the Bengals. I just hope they can turn this around, because if they can't, I don't know, man. But I'm happy it wasn't a trap game for the Jets, against the Jets. Next, you have the Dallas Cowboys at number 10. So this is starting off the top 10. So the Cowboys, obviously I have them in playoff contenders, not deep playoffs, because we all know how the Cowboys roll. They lost to the Bucs 19-3, and since then, they've been defensive battles against the Bengals. They won with Cooper Rush because Dak Prescott's out for a while. Surprising, actually. I didn't really expect this to be. I expected Cooper Rush to be like I don't know, like a Geno Smith situation, but he's not. Although Geno Smith isn't that bad, so maybe that's not a bad comparison. Maybe the right comparison would be more like Joe Flacco. So Cooper Rush doesn't, or Andy Dalton, that's the perfect one. Cooper Rush doesn't look that bad. At least for a backup quarterback, he's alright. Their defense is really good. Their offense is still CeeDee Lamb and Ezekiel Elliott for the most part. But they also, who'd they beat last week? They beat, oh yeah, that's right, the Giants. That was a game that happened. But no, I think this Cowboys team will sneak in. They won't be better than the Eagles, obviously. If they beat the Eagles this year, that'll be surprising. But whatever. They're not terrible, and they're actually pretty decent for the Cowboys. Even though every team, like the Bucs, the Packers, and the Cowboys are all playing like 1970s style football. Alright, and now the next team in the top 10, number 9, is the Jacksonville Jaguars. Yes, I have the Jacksonville Jaguars in the top 10. If you told me this a week ago, not a week ago, 3 weeks ago, even after week 1, I'd be like, what? What would they do in order for me to see that happen? But they beat the Chargers. I don't know if that's a big deal or not yet. We'll see. And they beat the Colts really badly. And this Jaguars team is not looking inept for the first time in a long time, since like 2017. So really, in all honesty, this Jags team might be really good. And I'll have them in playoff contenders, and I'm sure they'll shoot out of here as soon as Week 6 comes along. Same with the Lions. They're all going to be in the tanking portion, I'm sure. But that's why I make these, because I'm bold in these predictions. Alright, next. And the playoff contenders, you have the Kansas City Chiefs. The Chiefs, I would have much higher on here if they didn't lose to the Colts, who lost to the Jacksonville Jaguars and tied the Texans. Not looking as good as I thought they would be looking. Let's be real here. They should have won by a ton. But they failed when it mattered most. So, it's all on you, KC. I still have them being higher than before. Oh, and by the way, the Jaguars are at 20. Were at 24 previously, so that's a gain of 15. And as for KC, they were previously at 12, and they're at 8, so it's a gain of 4. So I don't know. This team is better than I expected them to be. I expected them not to be as good. Of course, losing to the Colts kind of hindered my opinion on them, so I'm happy I didn't do predictions 2 weeks ago. Otherwise, it'd be like number 1 right now. But yeah, I don't know. Weird. Really, really weird. But that's where KC is. Next, we'll start the deep playoff contenders. So we have the Los Angeles Rams for the first one at number 7, which is the second one that didn't change. The Rams, I don't know. They got beat out by the Bills bad. They barely nicked out the Falcons. And they barely held on against the Cardinals. So maybe this is a very bad choice. They haven't proven themselves yet against a good opponent yet. So we'll see about that. I don't know. How long is Super Bowl hangover supposed to last? Because if I recall correctly, the Bucs didn't really affect them that bad. They nicked out the Cowboys, beat the Falcons bad. Then they lost to the Rams, but the Rams are whatever. They were good last year. And they're good this year, and I have them here, but I don't have them any higher because they haven't proven themselves yet. So until they play a quality opponent and beat them, I have them right here. Next, you have at number 6 the Buffalo Bills, which, if they beat the Dolphins, they would have been number 1 for sure. But the Dolphins, it really showed how inept they can be. How inept the Bills can be, I mean. So they won 21-19. And the Bills had every chance they could to get 6 extra points on that game. In the second half, the dude should have ran out of bounds so they could get a field goal. And in the second half, same situation. The guy should have ran out of bounds. I don't know why he didn't. Like, you have 10 seconds on the clock. You gotta get there quick and do stuff with that. Right? I mean, that's what the Cowboys learned. And they did it twice in one day. In one day, they did it twice. And then they just didn't look as good as they usually do. So I don't know how good this Dolphins team is, but they're 3-0, and they're still on the board, so we'll see where they're placed. And next at... Oh, and by the way, Buffalo was previously at number 2, and now they dropped 4. Next, at number 5, you have the Green Bay Packers. And yes, I know what you're going to say. Why are the Bucs still on the board when the Packers beat them last week? Well, first of all, they barely beat them. They should have blown them out. Let's be real here. They got 14 points on their first 2 drives and got to the 1-yard line before fumbling it into the end zone on their 3rd drive, and would have been up 21-3 otherwise, and it would have looked like a much different game. But no, they just kind of died there. They didn't score again. I don't even think they really got into Bucs territory. I think they got barely into there and then got sacked into Bucs territory, so they had to punt. Yeah, this team, their offense is not good besides their running game. I mean, Lazard and Romeo Doubs, who I never heard of this person before this week, but they looked good with Rodgers. The O-line looked pretty good, although it was hard to tell because Rodgers was throwing screens and checkdowns for pretty much every time after that fumble. But Yeah. And like I said, I judge it based on injuries. And because we had Mike Evans out, Chris Godwin, and Julio Jones out, that's big. Because two of the reasons one of the reasons the Bucs lost is because we kept turning the ball over, both times by receivers who are rather untested, by Gage and Perryman, who I like both of those guys, but they're not as good as our top three receivers. And so, really, in all honesty, if we had, and I know this is an excuse, but if we had Evans, Godwin, and Julio, that probably would have been a different game. But that's why I think we're better than the Packers are in our current state. Or not in our current state, but in our future state. Like, if we faced them in the playoffs and everyone was healthy, or not even in the playoffs, so we just faced them with everyone healthy, I think the Bucs would probably win by a bit more. But that's what I'm talking about. Next, you have at number 4. Oh, and by the way, the Packers were at number 6 previously, so they gained 1. At number 4, you have the Baltimore Ravens, who are really good, but I don't know. It's tough to tell. They beat the Jets bad, which is good. That's what you're supposed to do with the Jets. And then they choked against the Dolphins. And then what was last week again? What did they play last week? Hold on a second. New England, and they beat them pretty bad. So, overall, a very decent team. They looked good in most of their games, except for that Dolphins game, but even then they looked good. That was just a hard-fought game all around. So, I previously had them at number 14, and they're at 4, so this is a good team. I think they're going to win the AFC North unless the Bengals start balling out. But it's week 3, so it's hard to tell. Number 3, you have the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I don't have them at number 1 just because I don't think they're the best, even with all their guys, based on what I've seen with the other two teams, and the Dolphins and the Eagles. But I don't know. This team offensively is something. It's almost as bad as the Broncos in some cases. I feel like if they're fully healthy, they'll be decent, but our defense is playing like 1999 Buccaneers. I don't know how to explain it. It's like watching Tony Dungy football in the current era. It's crazy watching our defense rip and shred through these teams. But if our offense can start building on that, then it's a pretty dangerous team. Then at number 2, you have the Miami Dolphins, who I didn't expect to be anywhere near the top 10, but here they are. For a gain of 17, because previously they're at 19. That's the biggest change right there. Dolphins looked very good. They beat all 3 of their opponents in overall good fashion. They beat the Patriots just outright, just beat them. They came back against the Ravens, which is a tough thing to do. And they nicked out the Bills, who were looking like they were going to be the best team. I would have had them at number 1 if they beat the Dolphins, probably. But I don't know. It's hard to tell. This Dolphins team is something else. But Tua haters, I don't think you have much to say about him anymore. I mean, there's still a chance that this is a fluke, but we'll see how it goes. And now the number 1 team is the Philadelphia Eagles. The Eagles, really good team. They beat all their opponents really bad, for the most part. For the Lions, they almost blew it, but they held on, barely. Go Lions. Their second game, they blew out the Vikings, and then their third game, they blew out the Commanders. So this team looks really tough, like really, really strong. So I'm excited to see what they do. But yeah, this is what I got. So it might be time to start tanking. You got the Texans, Seahawks, Commanders, Falcons, Bears, and Jets. In the midsection, you have the Raiders, the Steelers, the Patriots, the Titans, the Cards, the Panthers, and the Giants. And on the outside looking in, you have the Colts, the Niners, the Vikings, the Broncos, the Saints, and the Browns. In the playoff contenders, you have the Chargers, the Lions, the Bengals, the Cowboys, the Jaguars, and the Chiefs. Then in the deep playoff contenders, you have the Rams, the Bills, the Packers, the Ravens, the Bucs, the Dolphins, and the Eagles. So that will wrap up this tier list. I hope that you all had a fun time here, and I'll see you in the next one. Bucs up.